Welcome back to Delta Waterfowl's The Voice of the Duck Hunter podcast. I'm your host, Joel Brice. Today, we have an exciting episode lined up because my guests are two men I've collaborated with for years on one of Delta's most well-known, popular, and effective initiatives, enhancing duck production on breeding habitat through targeted predator management and hen house programs. Mike Buxton, a waterfowl biologist with extensive expertise in the effects of predators on nesting ducks, focuses on making predator management more efficient, effective, and widely implemented. And then there's Matt Chouinard, our expert in optimizing and expanding Delta's thousands of strategically placed, elevated cylindrical nesting structures known as hen houses. You won't want to miss his insights on why hen houses provide hen mallards the best chance of success, how Delta continually works to maximize ducks produced per dollar invested, and essential considerations if you're thinking about building and installing your own hen house. Together, Mike and Matt form the backbone of our efforts to get a huge number of ducks into the fall flight each year. In our conversation, we discuss why Delta's work is increasingly vital, how hen houses, predator management, and habitat conservation support one another, and what the future of large-scale duck production looks like as Delta ramps up its million duck campaign. So without further ado, let's get started. Mike Buxton, Matt Chouinard, welcome to the Delta Waterfowl podcast.
Hey, Joel.
Thank you.
Hey, you guys have been here before, so we should say it's a welcome back. Kyle Wintersteen, how you doing?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, producer Kyle. You're not here in North Dakota. We're sitting in, Matt and Mike and I are sitting at in my office at Delta headquarters in Bismarck, North Dakota. My truck said, I don't know if it was wrong, but it said minus 27 degrees.
That's about what mine said about 6:45 this morning when I came in. Was real cold.
That was cold.
I saw negative 56 wind chill down in Linton. Negative 35 was their real temperature. So
that's cold. That's cold. Yeah. My truck said it was cold. And it's tough to let the dog outside.
Yep.
Yeah. Kyle, what's the...
Pennsylvania feels pretty civilized by that measure.
Yeah. What's your temperature in Pennsylvania?
We were down into the teens. Today we're up to a balmy 40, and it feels like 70.
Oh yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, we had the 40s just a couple weeks ago, but now we're on a stretch of creeping above zero for, I think it's a couple 3 weeks before it's over. But I saw something in the 40 degrees coming up, so that will be welcome. But well, welcome everybody to the podcast. Thank you, Matt and Mike, for taking the time out of your busy day delivering duck production programs to talk about duck production programs. So both Matt and Mike, they share a title, Waterfowl Programs Director, and both guys have kind of a unique skill set, one on hen houses, one on predator management. But hey, the fact of the matter is you guys are both working on the same programs all the time. But when I go through this Waterfowl Programs Director, I think of Spies Like Us, and I want to say, Director, which would have been Doctor, of course. But Mike, let's get to know you a little bit. I know it's been a little while since you've been on the podcast, but Waterfowl Programs Director Mike Buxton, why don't you tell the listener, just give us a quick version of where you're from and what brought you to Delta, and then I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about your career here.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised on the East Coast, up in Vermont, and grew up hunting, much like everybody or a lot of other folks here. And duck hunting was really the one that I gravitated towards. I think it's because it was more action-packed for me. So that's what kind of drew me to that, and that led me down the career path of I want to work with ducks. So I think it was what led me to Delta actually originally was between my sophomore and junior year in college. I decided to take an internship and applied to a bunch of ones all across the country, but was offered a job with Delta as a technician, seasonal technician in North Dakota. So I took that. It's first time out on the prairies, eye-opening experience for me, and kind of realized that's where I wanted to be. So worked for Delta as technician for a couple more summers, and then was brought on as a graduate student. Did my master's with Delta up in northern North Dakota, and then when that finished, I was offered a job working for Delta full time, and I've been here full time since April of 2013.
I can't believe that.
I know it's been a long time.
Already that amount of time.
Yep.
Definitely, that's been a long time. But hey, you're a talented guy, and we're glad to have you here. And yeah, over a decade has absolutely flown by. So your favorite duck, Mike, is a widgeon.
Widgeon. Yep.
Why is that?
For some reason, I don't know if it's because growing up we just never saw them, but for some reason I just kind of gravitated towards them, and that's stuck. I don't really have a rhyme or reason as to why they are, but I think they look really cool, and I like to shoot them. So
They're a pretty cool duck.
Yeah. Did you have widgeon growing up?
no.
No.
The kind of the bread and butter for us, in upstate Vermont was mallards and black ducks and wood ducks, of course, and then late season would be golden eyes and bluebills on Lake Champlain between Vermont and New York. So really, a lot of the ducks that we hunt out here, I didn't hunt growing up. I remember down in Mississippi, I shot my first shoveler, and I was super excited about it. And all the guys at the WMA couldn't figure out why I was. It's because I had never seen one before. I never shot one before. So
Yeah, I think where a person grows up really can affect what they think is their favorite. And this is, I don't know if this, I'm proud of this story, but it's also just a skosh embarrassing, because I grew up in Wisconsin and we hunted. It was wood ducks, easy, find your wood ducks, and you'd scrape out a mallard. I think I shot a blue-winged teal, and that was, it was like a unicorn. But when I moved out to the prairies, I had never seen a shoveler before. And I think there were 3 shovelers, and I think I belly crawled for about 200 yards to get up on those shovelers. And I did shoot all of them. And I just sat there and I looked at them, and I was so proud. And I had no idea that there was potentially a stigma, depending on the room you're in. But I still think that they're a fascinating duck, but probably because I didn't grow up with them. So it's neat to be around them.
Yep.
Matt, how are you doing?
Great.
Great. You had a bad start to your day?
Yeah, it wasn't the best, but it's going good now.
We'll leave that one. We'll leave that one at that one. But Matt, why don't you tell us real quick again? Give us a little bit of give us the 60-second version of Matt Chouinard.
So my story is a lot like Mike's. I'm a little older than him, I guess, but very, very similar. Grew up duck hunting. I'm from southeast Missouri originally, but grew up duck hunting in flooded timber and rice in Arkansas and in southeast Missouri, and really had a passion for that. And so I went to the University of Missouri and decided I wanted to follow a wildlife career, and kind of through an older brother who had kind of followed a similar career path, heard about Delta, and so I applied for a seasonal position at Delta in 1999, and worked on some predator management projects in Saskatchewan, and did that for a couple summers, as a technician, and then went through graduate school, just kind of similar to what Mike did through Delta, but mine was working on hen houses, and so had a real interest in that because I grew up shooting mallards and flooded timber in Arkansas. So seeing a tool that could be used to produce more ducks was pretty fascinating. And so then when I finished graduate school, at that time there wasn't a job for me at Delta, but I went to work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for a few years and was out in Nevada working on a refuge, but my heart was still in the prairies, and had the opportunity to come back and work for Delta in 2007, I believe, and been here ever since. Been great.
Sheesh, it's a long time.
Yeah,
I think we added that up. If you take the 3 of us on the duck production side, we're over 50 years of combined experience. Maybe even cutting it short.
Yeah,
probably cutting it short. It's quite a long time, but it's fun coming to work knowing you guys are here. I'll admit that. So
We like you too, Joel.
Aw. Group hug. All right. So what we're going to do here is, I think a lot of repeat listeners to the podcast are probably pretty familiar with our duck production programs, hen houses, predator management. Might be familiar with the Million Duck Campaign, and the Million Duck Campaign it's an initiative that we started, I think it was a couple, 3 years ago already, but basically is we know hen houses work, we know predator management works, and so the Million Duck Campaign kind of speaks for itself, but maybe the background of it, the money side, it's an endowment campaign. So basically, some of our teammates have been on a campaign to create an endowment that perpetually funds the production of 1 million ducks per year. So that's the Million Duck Campaign. 250,000 of those coming out of hen houses, so there's your mallards, and then 750,000 coming out of predator management. And that's a mix of species. We might 6, 8, 10 different species at times, depending on where you're located. Maybe that's a bit high on the species number, but a wide variety of duck species that we're impacting with that program. But I guess we kind of felt, Kyle, that it was important to maybe back up a little bit, but then also give everyone an update about the programs, where they came from, some of our plans coming, ahead in the coming years. So I think we're going to start doing a little bit of background information on a hen house. So I don't want to make the assumption that everybody knows what a hen house is, because Matt, you're going to be doing most of the talking about this particular tool here. Mike, why don't you describe for the listener what a hen house is?
Sure. Well, a Delta hen house is a cylindrical structure that sits on top of a post out in the water, and that cylinder is made up of wire and flax straw, and the purpose of the hen house is to provide a safe nesting place for primarily mallards to nest. We put them in areas where the background or nest success in the absence of management is really, really low, and it basically removes or drastically reduces the predator from the equation by putting a duck nest up on a post in the middle of a wetland where the majority of nest predators can't reach them.
Beautiful. Picture a wire tube with flax stuffed in it on a post in the water. Matt, how did Delta, none of us were here at that time, but give the listener an overview of how Delta got into hen houses. Where does it start?
Right. So I think nest structures of some kind have been around for a long time. One of the first kind of precursors to a hen house was brought over by a student at the Delta Marsh in the 1950s. It was called a Dutch woven basket, and it had some similarities to hen houses, not exactly the same, but duck populations kind of went up and down, due to drought and different things from once we started doing duck surveys in the 50s, and people were always looking for ways to increase duck populations, especially in those down times, and so started investigating a variety of different nest structures, both Delta and other, outfits looking at, nest baskets, nest cones, culverts, just a whole suite of them. And I guess it would have been in the early 1990s, they started looking at nest cylinders in, Iowa and Illinois. And one of Delta's board members picked up on that and said, hey, we should try these. And another Delta staffer, longtime Delta staffer, Jim Fisher, they built 140 of them and installed them near Minnedosa, Manitoba, which is about an hour and a half west of Delta's, birthplace, I guess, at the Delta Marsh. And I think everybody went into it thinking this is, whatever, we'll do this. And we're just shocked at how quickly mallards started using them, how high a percentage of nest success they had, and that spawned years and decades now of research on hen houses ever since.
One of the things I love about Delta is, our origin was in science and research. But what I love about modern day Delta is that sometimes there's just something that's born out of a research project that's too good to just publish and stick on a shelf, right? And hen houses are one of those, and predator management is the other. So Matt, when you came to Delta as a graduate student, I think if I just kind of summarize 1990 until, the moment that you came to do your research around 2000?
2001 was the first season of the research.
Yeah. So what we'd seen is, again, you talked about, let's put these things out here. They look kind of goofy. Maybe they'll work, maybe they won't. And they did.
Mm-hmm.
But what we started to do, and I think you really kicked that off, is, okay, it works as a research concept, but now let's start tweaking and testing and defining what we would do as a manager, right? And so that's enter Matt Chouinard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an overview of the question of your research and then what you tested?
So I think there was, people were putting out hen houses, and they were putting them out in a variety of locations. It kind of, there were folks from New York, Iowa, Minnesota putting out hen houses, kind of spawned a lot by Delta's initial success. And the initial thought from a deployment perspective is that mallards are territorial. They're going to, each spring set up shop on a wetland. And if you put one hen house there, they can nest in that one, but you shouldn't put more than that because, they're territorial. They're going to, run off any other pairs that come around. But they quickly realized that wasn't the case. They were finding multiple nests in hen houses, and there was no management prescription for them at the time. So when my research, when I was thinking of an idea, I was thinking, how can we produce as many ducks as possible out of these things? And so we started looking at optimal deployment strategies. And in the Minnedosa country, there's lots of small, semi-permanent, permanent wetlands. And when I say small, like, 1 to 4 acres in terms of water. And so we devised an experiment to put up to 4 hen houses on a wetland, and we even broke the wetlands down into 2 size classes to see, if it mattered if they were in smaller or larger wetlands. And I guess the rest is history in terms of the prescription. We determined that 2 per wetland in that part of the world was the optimal strategy, and they were, that success was really good and production was really good.
So that was kind of a blend of economics and biology, right?
Right.
If you had 4 hen houses in a wetland, you had circumstances where all 4 were used, right?
That's correct.
But it must have been on average that you'd put the 4 out there, you spend all the money, build the structures, put them in the ground, maintain them, but more often than not, a larger percentage of them were not used, right?
That's right.
So that's driving the cost per duck up, right?
Yeah, it made more financial sense to put out 2 in a wetland. You were going to get, maybe you might not get the total duck production, but the cost per duck was lower at 2 per wetland.
Yeah. Well, again, for the listener, we have to, we have contractors that install our hen houses, and then they maintain them annually, right? And so cost is a real factor. So I don't know. I would imagine you're pretty proud of being a part of or delivering a research project that literally is being used in a massive program.
Yeah, you always have a little bit of sense of pride, but for me, it was kind of more about, I just wanted more ducks, and I think that's true with everybody at Delta and probably most hunters. If you want to see more ducks, let's do it the most efficient way we can.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Curious for the listener, how many, on average, right? How many ducks are produced out of a hen house, Matt?
So right now we've done a lot of analysis over the years, in terms of the productivity of them. But on an annual basis, we're estimating that we produce about 2.25 ducks per hen house. If you take a hen house, just to help the listener with the calculations, you take a hen house Not all of them are used every year, so about 80% in our key areas are used, and then not all of those nests are successful. So that ends up being about a half of a nest, on average, right? Like there's no such thing as a half a nest, but if you have about each hen house hatches one half of a nest per year, and then from that clutch there's about 9 eggs. So those 9 eggs hatch, and so there's 9 ducklings. So it's 4.5 ducklings hatched from a hen house, and then not all the ducklings survive to maturity. About 50%, succumb to some manner of predator. So that knocks you. There's where you end up at the 2.5 or 2.25 ducks per hen house.
We talk about hen houses and what an efficient use of dollars it is in terms of ducks made per dollar invested. But it's pretty cool that it's not. We're not talking when we talk about the ducks we're making with hen houses. We picked on spoonbills already, so I'll say we're not making spoonbills. We're not making buffalo heads. It's mallards. I've always been curious. Why is it? Mallards are such adaptable nesters, and they'll nest in everything from a flower pot to traditional prairie grassland to hen houses. But is there any thought into why are mallards? Why are they such adaptable nesters? Why have they adopted this sort of survival strategy that lends them to hen houses and other ducks haven't adopted it?
You want me to tackle that?
Yeah,
one?
go for it. Yeah.
That's a tough question. We can't really get into the mind of a mallard, but why they do the things that they do. But I think there's a reason why they're the most common duck. I mean, they try nesting in a variety of locations, and when they're successful, they keep doing those things, right? So mallards have been known to nest over water. We've got canvasbacks, redheads. They nest over water, and typically nest success for those species is higher. But mallards nest in the uplands as well. But those overwater nesting mallards that nest on a muskrat mound or something like that, a hen house is probably not that far of a stretch for them to jump into there and try it out. And the other thing about mallards, all the species kind of have a range of their tendencies, right? And mallards, tend to have a very high homing rate to where they've been successful. And to where they nested before, and to where they were successful before. So hen houses are one of those things where if you're going to have that high of a nest success rate, that hen's pretty likely, if she's alive, she's going to come back and do it again. And so that's why they keep jumping into those things. Once they try a hen house one time, or one hen does it, they keep doing it, and even we know that their offspring do it as well.
Interesting.
Very good. Very good. Mike, you're the numbers guy on the team. So when we get to the 250,000 mallards being produced annually out of hen houses, about how many hen houses is that going to take?
That's a little north of 111,000. And those will be spread from one end of the Prairie Powell region to the other. It's southeastern South Dakota up to the northwestern corner of the PPR in Alberta.
One of the things I think anybody, whether it's a business or a conservation program, you have target areas. You know where you want to go, or a target market. So in this case, we know where we want to go. We're going there already. Matt, can you describe for the listener what are our target areas? What's our highest priority target area?
Right. So our highest priority target areas are the parklands of Canada. So that's Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. The parklands are that transition zone between the boreal forest and the prairies. They're characterized by very, frequent or very common, very dependable wetlands. They're mostly semi-permanent and permanent wetlands. They're small. They're just perfect spots for hen houses because a hen house needs to be over water, and it needs to be over water every year. And so those semi-permanent wetlands, and when I say semi-permanent, it means they're going to have water almost every single year. So that makes the parklands ideal in that regard, and they're also going to be attractive to ducks because they have water every year. And then I guess the third component that makes him the highest priority is that the parklands are also a tough place for a duck to make a living that's nesting, because there's a large suite of predators that are there. There's more avian predators. It's more consistent conditions, so I think the predator communities are more consistent. And so nest success for ducks that don't have something like hen houses in the parklands is poor. So that makes it our highest priority area, those parkland areas. But there's other areas that are found in North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota that kind of meet that criteria too. Where ducks have a tough way to go, and there's the wetland base that would be suitable for hen houses.
One of the big questions we get is, does it matter what the surrounding landscape is like as to whether or not a hen house is going to be more or less likely to be used? Does grass or cropland, what are there habitat variables that seem to influence their use?
So I think initially everybody thought that the best place to put him was in a wetland surrounded by cropland, because it would be there would be no place for the duck to nest, so they would choose a hen house. But really that hasn't shown to be the case. Really the biggest driver for hen house use tends to be pair numbers. So if you're selecting a site for hen houses, which of course we've selected our target areas, we're going to pick the areas that have the highest breeding populations of mallards first, in combination with the wetland base. The surrounding wetland type or surrounding habitat type is less of a factor. Some research has shown that grass around the wetlands actually increases use, but that may also be tied to the fact that there were higher pairs there.
Okay. Yeah, that is definitely something that seems to pop up from time to time. And, it is interesting. You start thinking like a human. You start thinking about the logic that maybe a particular animal or duck in this case, but it doesn't always pan out that way. That's why I think the research will probably never be done. We're always working on different aspects or different questions, different ways to improve things. When we first started this, I know when I first started in 2001, we were using volunteers a bit to maintain some of our structures. But you fast forward to today, we love volunteers. They're the backbone of the organization. But on the hen house side, we don't use volunteers. Right? Can you give us some thoughts on that?
So, even backing up a little further, I think when Delta was, coming out of our research phase and growing into a delivery, a programmatic organization where we were going to do hen houses on our own. Before that, we looked at it from the perspective of, hey, let's tell the world that these hen houses are great and get people to do it. And, somewhere along the lines, we started recognizing that people do get fired up to do it, and there's some volunteer or outfits and organizations that do a good job of it. But there's often times where those nest structures would be put out, and when it came time to do the maintenance the next year, maybe whoever had the passion to put them out there was busy or had health issues or whatever, and the work wouldn't get done. And then, quite honestly, it was really difficult to imagine a situation where volunteers could put out the sheer numbers of hen houses that we had an interest in. And so we started dabbling in the idea of, we'd have contractors that would take care of the maintenance and installation of the hen houses, and it was probably around, we had some doing it as far back as when student projects would end. But we started kind of more dabbling, 15 years ago or so, hiring contractors and seeing how that model would work and it actually turned out to be a really cool thing. We can go into an area where we know we want to put up hen houses. We can find somebody that's local that has connections with the landowners, has a passion for doing it, either, just for a little extra money in their pocket or because they care about ducks. We feel like it's important to have that monetary incentive to make sure that they're out there doing the work each year. And then we manage those contractors, remotely. And so far, we've got 47 contractors actually in the field this year, installing and maintaining hen houses. So we think that's a way we can really ramp this up and stay engaged in the local communities and have relationships in those local communities with the people that live there.
That's one of the best aspects of it to me. Yes, with the payment becomes the reliability. And if for some reason that individual wasn't willing to do it anymore, and now we have something to offer an incentive to someone else. But one of the big things there is, I just call it social license, right? In that whoever the contractor is, they might be asking permission from their elementary school teacher, or their coach, the farmer down the road that they hunt on their land, and you get that community access, community pride. And I just love that, right? That's just a great way to I think extend the Delta culture, and the vision. And one of the great things about hen houses is they don't compete for land use, right? They're in a wetland and nobody's in the wetland. Like a farmer, a rancher, they're not in the wetland, right? So
Right.
they literally don't compete with existing land use.
I think generally most landowners, obviously they have, they need to make enough money to feed their family as well, right? But most landowners, in my experience, they have an interest in wildlife too, and if they have the opportunity to allow somebody to come on their land and do some work like our programs, like hen houses, they're actually pretty excited about it. We rarely get turned down for permission to put out hen houses and produce a few extra ducks.
So maybe there's a landowner in the Prairie Pothole region listening to this. Wouldn't that be cool? But what is the obligation of the landowner?
So the only obligation of the landowner is to allow access to the land. We have we call it a conservation agreement, where the landowner would, with the contractor, work with the contractor on the locations where they'd want to install hen houses, and they sign an agreement. It's non-binding, that it allows access for 10 years for installation of the hen house and annual maintenance, and all of that work is done in winter right now. Like, I kind of doubt any contractors are out working today when it's negative. I heard this morning it was negative 35 in Saskatoon, so Fahrenheit. So it's pretty chilly. Nobody's going to go out. Even our toughest contractors are going to stay indoors on those days. But all the work is done in winter when farmers aren't actually out on the land anyway, and their only obligation is to let us go out there once a year to make sure they're maintained and ready to go for the next nesting season.
Winter's definitely the easiest time to maintain these suckers. Otherwise, you'd be out there in waders or a canoe or a john boat or some sort. But winters aren't always easy. This winter should be quite easy.
Right.
We've had the cold, so you have the safe ice and very little snow.
Not much snow. Some areas, we're so widespread. We have some contractors that are complaining about the snow, but for the most part, this is a good year to be out there. The only negative now is that it's so cold that the ice is starting to get in that 3 feet range, 3 feet thick range. So it's a little slower drilling holes for pounding in a post. But
That's probably the one thing that people, if you're not from this part of the world, and if you've never drilled a hole in the ice in a wetland, which there's probably 100 people that have drilled a hole in a wetland in the dead of winter, but there's we drilled one 3 weeks ago, something like that, and there was no water.
Right.
And so basically went through the ice into the ground.
Right.
So it's some unique conditions, and way back when it was all ice augers. But in a situation like that, you get through the ice, you hit that dirt, and that auger blade is done for all practical purposes.
Yeah.
So now we use an earth auger.
Right.
2-inch bit, specialized in going through hard materials, right?
Right. It's got a carbide tip on there, which there's a lot of benefits to it. The carbide doesn't get dull as quickly as the the kind of I don't know if you've seen the ripper tips on ice fishing or the laser. They're really sharp and they shave ice really great for ice fishing, but they don't go through dirt. So the carbide tip, will go through the ice, and when it hits the frozen dirt, it goes through that as well. And so that's been kind of a game changer, because most of the wetlands we put them in are really shallow. And sometimes they're even dry. Like in this year where you were talking about, Joel, we had a wetland that the water levels, we've been in a bit of a drought here, so the water levels are low, and you got to be able to work in all those situations. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that earth auger, which is that you're the first one to bring the earth auger to Delta, right?
I'm the first one to bring it to Delta, but I can't take credit. It was actually some folks from the Iowa DNR that were using. They were using them for some manner of sampling in wetlands, and then started adopting them for hen houses. And I was out one winter installing hen houses with a traditional ice auger, and I went out to a couple sloughs and drilled down 1.5 feet and hit dirt and pounded posts for the next 1.5 feet of ice, and said, I can't do this. I mean, I'm gonna, and so I bought one of those earth augers, and we haven't looked back since.
No, they're pretty amazing. And now you're using some gas power heads, but now you guys have started
Mostly
branching out
Yeah,
into the battery powered.
the improvements in battery powered equipment have been so great that even for an earth auger drilling through frozen dirt, the battery powered ones seem to be the way to go. You don't have to worry about a sticky carburetor or anything like that. They start up every time and still have the power to do the job.
No, that's good. Hey, before we move on from hen houses, and I think we're going to move on here, Mike, you've been sitting so nice and quiet. But I think, Matt, there was a multi-year research study in southwest Manitoba, which is kind of the heart of our hen house program. There was a period there, it was about 5 years, where there's ground nesting mallards and hen house nesting mallards, and there was a comparison of their hatch rates of nests. Can you give the listener an overview of that real fast?
So there was actually 4 years of Delta funded research through a student named Dan Colton, and then there was a year just prior to that was through the Prairie Habitat Joint Venture, where they were monitoring mallards in that same area, and those mallards, of course, they were radio marked, so they could see where they nested in the grass or in hen houses. And so over the course of that 5 years, there was concurrent work in the same areas: hen houses versus mallards nesting in hen houses versus mallards nesting in the grass. And the average nest success for mallards in the grass during that time was 2.3%, and the average nest success in hen houses was 61%.
Jeez.
So you could see why that, everybody was like, wow, this is pretty eye-opening. These hen houses are making a difference. And that student, Dan Colton, at the same time, he was doing some work with radioisotopes, and he was marking birds that he was capturing in both in the ground nests and in the hen houses. And his work determined that hen houses were contributing the lion's share of the recruits. And when we say recruits, that's the hens that are returning to nest there the next year. In his study area, hen houses were the biggest contributor. So it was pretty clear that you can show that hen houses were contributing to the population in a big way.
That's impressive. Very impressive. Kyle, anything to add to that before we move on to predator management?
No, I'm ready to hear from Mike.
Well,
we all just can't wait.
Tired of me already.
I'll just add one thing to the nest success stuff that Matt just mentioned, is that, and I think a lot of folks that aren't intimately involved in duck production or duck research here on the prairies don't really comprehend until they see the numbers, like how bad nest success can be on the prairies. Matt just said 2.3% nest success on the ground. That means that almost 98% of the nests out there are failing, and only 2% are hatching. To put that in baseball terms, that'd be a batter hitting .020, and that's a one-way ticket to the minors, honestly.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, but whereas, in a hen house where they're getting 60%, you ever see a batter batting 600, they're instant Hall of Fame. And so I just think it's worth noting that just the discrepancy between 98% of nests failing and 60% of nests hatching using using these programs, because that can make a real impact on how many ducks are in the air in the fall.
Beautiful. No, that's good. Very good information. Mike, shifting on to predator management, you have a background that lends you uniquely an expert in this field. You had some of your early technician work. You did your own graduate work. Can you just kind of tell the listener maybe your predator management background?
Sure. Well, my first technician job or seasonal job with Delta was working on a predator management study back in 2008, and in northern North Dakota. And the next couple of years, we're nest searching, doing the same thing on predator management sites. And then my graduate work focused on a very new question, utilizing still trapping and predator management, but in a specific landscape. So, in some of the, we've been doing predator management research since 1994, so over 30 years now. And when people hear we've been doing predator management research for over 30 years, I think a lot of people think, well, it took you 30 years to figure out if it works or not. No, I mean, we've known that it works for a long time, but much like what Matt was saying with his work of refining the tool to get the biggest return on investment, that's where Delta started to kind of shift into that mode with my graduate work and looking at landscapes where duck nest success was exceptionally bad. And so in these landscapes, they're classified as what we call low grass density landscapes. And so these are landscapes where, on a township scale, less than 15% of that township is in nesting cover. And for those that aren't familiar, a township, 36 square miles. So a 36 square mile area, less than 15% in grass, but still attracts a high number of ducks. We're talking 60, 80, up to 100 pairs of breeding ducks per square mile. But in these low grass landscapes, nest success is pretty abysmal. Anywhere from 5 to 10, maybe 12% on their own. And so my project was focusing on, can we apply predator management in these landscapes and have a noticeable effect in nest success? And we found that we could. My research had nest success on trap sites about 35%, whereas the non-trap sites were between 10 and 12%. So a tripling of nest success on a trap site versus a non-trap site. And since my research concluded in 2013, we've seen even greater increases in these low grass density areas. To some of our trappers are seeing 50% nest success in a lot of places.
I should be fair. So because I had you introduce Hen Houses, I'm going to have Matt introduce predator management. So just for listeners, what is predator management, Matt?
Sure. So predator management is we call it the seasonal reduction of predators on, depending on the treatment site on an area. And the goal that we start March 15th, our trappers will go to an area that we've designated based off of our site criteria with high pair numbers and the suitable grass mix. And they will begin trapping March 15th, which is before most ducks or all ducks have arrived from the wintering grounds. And they will trap during that nesting period from March 15th to July 15th. That's the bulk of the nesting and brood rearing period. And they will, their goal is to reduce the predator populations on those sites to a level where ducks can be successful nesting. And most of they're focusing on nest predators like raccoons, skunks, whatever predator happens to be in that location. It's primarily raccoons and skunks, but there are other predators that are also tough on duck nests, and their goal is to get those predator numbers down to a level where ducks can succeed.
Yeah, I always say, we've all been around this for quite some time, and I always take great care to say, hey, this is not an eradication program, and this is restoring the predator-prey balance. And, if we're sitting down going through a PowerPoint, we go all the way back to the Lewis and Clark days, pre-settlement, where this was just seas of grass and seas of water, and the predator community was different. And then you had the homesteading phase, where everybody was their own. They managed, they would manage predator populations on their own. Anything that would eat a chicken or a cow, right? So there was actually, before settlement, their predator management was accomplished by larger apex predators. Then when you kind of lost that homesteading phase, there was a massive fur trapping boom, followed by a crash. And so largely the predator population on the prairies is unchecked. And I would say out of that historical balance, ducks are food, and duck nests have always been eaten by predators. It's just that, like you were talking about, that southwest Manitoba, 2.2% of ground nesting mallards, that doesn't even maintain your local population. What does, Matt?
So there's been some research in North Dakota that for mallards indicated that they needed to achieve 15% nest success just to sustain the population. For other species that are lower survived species, that nest success may actually have to jump. So for our blue-winged teal, they might require 20% nest success to sustain the population. So any place where you're achieving 2.3 or 12 or 10, those populations, those local populations of ducks are having to be kind of almost rescued from ducks hatching somewhere else. And they're going to be attracted there because of the habitat. But, predator management hen houses give them a chance to succeed.
No, that's great. Mike, we hear a lot, you can't trap the whole prairies. And we say, you're right, we don't want to. So we have a very targeted, you could even say precise approach to selecting our sites. Can you talk to listeners through that a little bit?
Sure. Well, coming out of the research from the early 2010s, we identified those areas of the landscape where it's low grass density, so under 15%, and this is on the U.S. side. The Canadian side's a little bit different, but on the U.S. side, our site criteria, we need to identify an area that, on the whole has less than 15% grass, because we know from not only our research, but several other research projects that have been done in the prairies, that nest success in those landscapes is pretty bad. And so that's where our landscape focus is. But, like Matt said with hen houses, it's the same for predator management, that we want to deploy this tool in areas where there's a lot of nesting pairs to impact. If we were to go into an area where there was only 10 pairs per square mile, our return on investment is not going to be that great. So we look at areas that are at least 60, but more often than not, 80 to 100 pairs per square mile, so that we can impact the most pairs possible, while also elevating nest success from the abysmal lows that it is in these types of landscapes. And so through a combination of, data that we get from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and some land cover data, we run models that look at where these suitable areas are. And when we have all these suitable areas, we can then go into these areas, much like we do with hen houses, and find trappers that are currently in these areas and put them to work, restoring that ecological balance that you talked about. And I think that's a good way of putting it, because you look at the prairies nowadays and you see raccoons and skunks kind of all over the place, and if you're not, again, intimately familiar with it, with the history that you laid out, Joel, is that these raccoons and skunks, they weren't, sure, they were here, but in pretty small numbers and pretty distinct areas, riparian corridors, river edges, bushy areas, stuff like that, nowhere near the range that they're at today. And obviously nowhere near the numbers that they were today. And I think the combination of habitat fragmentation and let's call it the loss of the full-time trapping community has really been kind of a perfect storm to allow these predators to get to the numbers that they are, because you used to have, all the way up until till the 80s, you had guys that, and gals for that matter, you'd have trappers that they could make their full-time, their annual salary, I'll call it, on trapping, based on the fur and the fur market. Well, now the fur market has crashed for quite a long time, and it's gotten even worse in the last 5 years. That it's just from a financial standpoint, there's not that incentive there anymore, and so therefore, like you mentioned, they kind of go unmanaged and unchecked for the most part.
For sure. I think I'm thinking of we did a listener generated question podcast some time ago. I think you were on that one, Matt, and so I'm just trying to think in my head, what are some of the questions that we get with this one? And I think one of the things that pops up is, I think a lot of people think maybe we're working on refuges or public land or something like that. But I think one of the biggest, I don't know if it's a secret or just maybe it's something that unless you've been to the prairies, it's not obvious to you, is the value of private land to duck production. Like I've heard it said that 90% of duck production in the prairies comes from private land. And I think a lot of people are surprised by that. Matt, is that a conversation that you ever have with people?
It is. I mean, I think for sure 90% of the land in the prairies is private. So, I mean, if you think about the prairie pothole region, 90% of it's private, and that includes the wetlands and many of the grasslands. I mean, that's where the duck production is going to occur, and that means you have to be able to deploy programs, there to produce ducks. And I don't know if this is where you were headed, Joel, but it feels like from a predator management perspective and a hen house perspective, you have the way to try to increase nest success. There's several ways, but one of the ways is to make a needle in a haystack. Put more grass on the landscape so ducks can be more successful. Well, when 90% of the land is private land and they can make more money on growing a crop, they're not going to put land back into grass. So then your other option is to try to help ducks in other ways, and nest success is one of the limiting factors for ducks. So if you want to increase nest success, you have to either provide a safer place for ducks to nest, or get rid of the things or reduce the things that eat them.
Yeah, that is the difficult part there. That I think there's this concept called the habitat threshold, and I would just describe it maybe rather than putting numbers to it, but that if you look on the landscape and you say, I don't know, let's look at a township like Mike was saying, let's call it 36 sections, 6 miles by 6 miles. There's if enough of that block of the landscape is in grass, as you add grass, in theory, hatching rates increase, right? Because the needle in the haystack, more haystack, less needle. So it's more difficult for a predator to find the duck nest, and hatch rates then go up. And that's a very true concept. But I think one of the things that we might hear sometimes is we'll just focus on the habitat. But I think that whole and absolutely habitat is critical. But I think the complementary nature of the work we do, Mike, do you want to talk about just kind of how it's not an either or proposition, and we never pitch it that way. What's your thoughts on that, Mike?
Right. Yeah. It's I think that's one of the biggest benefits to, especially the predator management program, is that it doesn't compete, much like Hen Houses doesn't compete with current land uses. And so the majority of the stuff that we work on that's privately owned is enrolled in CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program. And that is, I think the Conservation Reserve Program was one of the greatest habitat policy wins for ducks in the prairies, just because it put grass back on the landscape where financially it didn't make sense for a farmer or a landowner to have it. And what I think is really nice about our program is that we're taking that incentive or that program that's already established, and we're maximizing the production, because you can have a quarter section of CRP and a sea of black dirt. And I kind of envision that as, one of those big Hollywood spotlights to a predator saying, like, food is right here. And so you kind of have every predator in the area knowing that that's where they're going to get fed. And so you can have a quarter section in the middle of a sea of black dirt, and that's great to have the habitat. I'm not disputing that, but I don't think that you end up maximizing the potential production of that place, because while you're providing a place for them to nest, you're also providing or you're also have a lot of predators in that area too. And so by reducing the numbers of these predators to a manageable level, you are I refer to it as maximizing the production potential of an area. And I think that that's where Delta really shines, is that, we can, it's not like you said, Joel, an either or. It's, it's an additive program on top of the great work that other NGOs and the federal government, the state government is doing to put habitat on there. We can come in and maximize the potential of that habitat.
Well said. Status update. So it's early February here, Matt. How many hen houses are contractors installing, and then what's the distribution? Not, just listing the jurisdictions.
So we have, like I said, 47 contractors out there with a goal of 2,100 new hen houses this year. Those will be going out in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, North Dakota, South Dakota. We'll also be, maintaining the 12,000 plus hen houses that are out there already. Making sure they're in good shape and replacing any ones that are necessary. So our goal is to get to just over 14,000 or almost 14,400 hen houses in the fleet for 2025 nesting season.
How's it going? Is the work getting done?
It's going good. Yeah, we've got a bunch of new contractors. There's always a little bit of like what's going on with this guy, but this year's been good so far. We've got a few more to go, but February is usually February in Canada. The prairies of Canada, March is a pretty big month for hen house work because the temperatures are starting to warm up. The days are a little bit longer. There's still good ice, but the conditions are a little more comfortable than negative 35.
Well, it one of the things that Mike, I'd mentioned, I'd called you the numbers guy before. Well, you're also kind of our techie. It's kind of weird to call a biologist a techie guy, but
It's very weird to think of me as a techie guy because I am nothing like that.
Yeah, but techie in the sense that Mike's developed I guess kind of a monitoring or data sharing, accomplishment sharing. I don't know what's the right word, Mike. Software, where we can communicate with our trappers and our hen house contractors about the work that's going on. Can you speak to that real fast?
Yeah, so it's essentially to take it back a little bit further. We've always monitored our trapping and our hen house efforts. I think it'd be irresponsible for Delta to just assume that everything was fine and then just not monitor them. So we've always monitored them in some degree, but that used to be, contractors and trappers would send in paper records at the end of the year of here's what I maintained, here's what I installed, here's what I set, here's what I caught, that kind of stuff. But that really kind of hamstrung us to a certain degree in that, we were getting all that information at the end of the season, and then you'd have to enter it all and all that kind of stuff. And so we were really looking for a way to see what was going on real time. And so what we ended up developing was a smartphone app that both our hen house contractors and our predator management trappers use this. And on the hen house side, every time they install a hen house, every time they maintain a hen house, they have certain buttons that they push on the smartphone app, and that sends a real-time data back to us in the office. And both Matt and I have, and our two biologists that we have working with us, Ryan Krager and Zach Copeland, we have dashboards that we can see at any given point on the hen house side, who the contractors are, how many they've installed, how many they've maintained, what's the use rates of the ones that they've maintained, kind of the schedule that they've been maintaining, stuff like that. And so that has really given us a significant leg up in being able to manage both the contractors and the trappers, because from a contractor standpoint, we can see their progress on maintenance, but then also, if it's a new contractor, and we've already seen the fruits of this year, is that if it's a new contractor, we can describe and train them as much as we until you're blue in the face, and then when they're actually out there putting out hen houses, if we can see where they're putting these hen houses, we can see if they align with our best management practices to ensure the highest use rates. And so, and in some cases, it's happened where a guy goes out and puts out 5 or 10, and we're like, whoa, that's not how we need to do these. And so we can make a phone call that day and say, hey, stop what you're doing, and let's have a conversation about how you need to put out these things so we can optimize the use. And prior to developing this real-time data stuff, it would have been the end of the year before we realized that, hey, these are in way too dense of an area, or they're way too close together, or any number of things. And so that technology is really, and it continues to evolve. The technology has really helped us as managers make sure that we're maximizing that production potential of an area by making sure that that our contractors and our trappers are out there doing the programs in a way that maximizes our return on investment.
I like everything about that phone app, but one of the things that I like as a manager back here, we're not out there in the field, is that when they hit a button, whether the hen house was used or they're describing its condition, you can have trigger it so they have to take a picture.
That's right. Yep.
So when they say it's used, we get a picture of it being used. When they say it's tipped over, we get a picture of that. And it's just a really nice way to be on the same page. And I imagine you end up with a hen house guy, Matt, who's like, I think this is what I saw, and you're able to actually have a better conversation with them.
Sure. You can get them to send pictures of they have the option to send a picture for everything. So if if they're checking a hen house and they are, unsure of whether or not it was used by a duck, they can send a picture, and we can have a conversation about it later. And it also, Mike may have mentioned this, but I think it sends a GPS point, which, is what provides that location, but it also is kind of a verification for us that they were at that location. I mean, you could have, in the past, they would use a GPS to collect information, or they'd send us paper notes, but we really, unless we actually went physically to that location, it would be difficult for us to know if they were there. This makes sure they have to be there in order to do it, and so if they're there, then combined with the pictures, we kind of get a pretty full understanding of what the work that's going on.
And we see some kind of neat pictures that come through too that don't have anything to do with whether it was used or not. I mean, yeah. 2 years ago, we got a picture of up in Alberta, I think it was. We had a moose that decided to use one of our hen houses to knock his antlers off, and so there was a moose antler laying right at the bottom of the hen house post. Something you'd never really think to see, but interesting things like that come through as well.
Yeah, last year there was one of the contractors sent us a picture of through the app of a bunch of dragonfly nymphs that had hatched. They'd crawled up the hen house post and hatched from there, and yeah, it's kind of you get in the mind of a hen house contractor, and they must be pretty excited to see something new and different. They send us cool pictures.
One of the best things is back in the day when I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you guys were here yet, but all of the trapper records were submitted by mail, so they were paper. Well, there's one guy, I probably won't use his name, but he's from central North Dakota, and it was a particularly bad wood tick season. And when I get this envelope, cut it open, open it up, and I pull out the paper, and I don't know, there must have been 30 dead wood ticks that just spilled across my desk.
Exactly who you're talking about.
He dropped them in there just to share with me how the conditions were. but they were dead. But it's all right. Now they don't have that opportunity to play those pranks on us anymore.
Well, I think also, we have the benefit to not or to having this kind of a data instead of the paper records is that, on the predator management side, we have obligations to permitting agencies and stuff like that to write reports about how the season went and what happened, and this is already, the data comes in a format that we can analyze pretty darn quick and get that stuff off. So from our standpoint, it's increased our efficiency as well. And I don't know about you, Matt, but I haven't had a single contractor or a single trapper that has complained about it. Every single one of them loves it, because the benefit is that they can, in that app, there's a aerial photo that they can map that they can flip over to, and like a hen house guy can see all the hen houses that he's charged with maintaining, so and how far, what his progress is to that point. And then trappers, they have a map of where all their traps are, where all their catches are, and they can identify areas where they may need to beef up a little bit with traps, or areas where they're catching a lot of stuff and may need to add some additional stuff. And so it's been really beneficial for all involved.
So it's approaching the middle of February. We're going to end up with 50 sites out on the landscape this upcoming spring. Mike, what's the spread?
So we have 9 sites across the Canadian prairies, in the 3 Canadian prairies, and then we have we have 13 in South Dakota, and then the balance is in North Dakota. North Dakota, we have several long-time trappers in North Dakota that they are on full-on management, and they're just going about their trapping using our proven techniques, and they're making ducks.
No, that's fantastic. The 50 is definitely the high water mark, in our careers, and I would say that's the Million Duck campaign in action. You'd mentioned Ryan and Zach earlier as 2 new biologists within the last
Ryan was hired July of 23, and Zach was just October this past year.
Yeah, so we're really at this, we're at this phase where, we're seeing growth, we're adding staff, we're adding programs, and basically, we're developing our ability to have rapid, I don't want to say exponential growth, might be maybe overused word, but we are preparing ourselves for that rapid growth when the Million Duck campaign shoots us into the sky and raise those million ducks. So it is a lot of fun just to see the change, and we spend a lot of our time strategizing about what we're doing right now, but the great thing about Zach and Ryan is they're able to handle more of the field component, so we can sit here and we can strategize about the future. How do we get new trappers? Where do we secure our hen house steel and all the materials and shipping and deployment? And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to be around this program as long as we have in the early days. A lot of research, small growth, modest growth to where we are today. And I don't know, what do you guys think? Kind of exciting to be around this phase?
Oh yeah, it's for a long time, like you said, Joel, it was slow or moderate growth, and the exciting thing to me is that we've had the most cost-effective duck production tools out there for a long time, and now we're poised in a position to really make an impact with them.
Right.
Yeah, very good. Matt, what's your favorite duck?
You were talking about that earlier, but if it's a tough question, because if I love hunting mallards, I love calling mallards, I love seeing mallards work in the woods and even in a big Hemi marsh up here. But if a pintail came in, or a black duck, or I would probably, if they came in with a flock of mallards, I'd shoot those first. So I don't really know what you could call it. I mean, I love widgeon too. I like Mike. If a widgeon came in, I'd probably shoot that first before a mallard. But if there was one kind of hunting mallard, it'd be mallard hunting, and it'd probably be hunting in the flooded timber. It's my favorite.
I love them all.
Yeah.
Although I
could
do,
say that.
I've never shot a white fronted goose yet,
Oh, yeah.
and that's on my, I don't know if it's on my bucket list, but that'll be a cool day. I don't know.
This year was the year to do it. Like, I think, mid-October, I still remember just the waves of white fronts coming into North Dakota, and they stuck around here for a while. And it seems like white fronts have been sticking around here a little bit in the fall. And this year was a good year for white fronts around here. Next fall, if they do it again, we'll have to get out.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my fall on college visits. Not for me, for my son.
Yeah. So, right.
Yeah, so got to hear the stories. Kyle, what's your favorite duck to hunt?
I easily the American black duck, and not just because it's an awesome duck, it's because I'm a Atlantic flyaway guy, and unlike Mike, I'm not one of the guys who got out. I've lived my life here, and it's the one duck that we can hang over the rest of your flyaways and brag on.
You're just trying to be different. That's all.
Yeah.
I've harvested. It's a unique bird, but I've harvested black ducks in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and North Dakota. I mean, it's not a normal, species of duck to harvest out this way, but they do get around a little bit. So, Kyle, any parting thoughts? I know we covered a lot of ground here. We're pushing over 60 minutes. Anything that
I'm always just impressed by the humility that these guys talk about the programs they deliver. If it were me, I think I'd be like, do you know how many ducks I made this spring? I mean, it's really cool what they're doing, and I'm always struck by the expertise and the precision of the science that goes into these. But no, that was great stuff, guys, and I appreciate hearing it. How you stay motivated, because when you deliver duck production, it keeps me motivated to do my job, so we can ensure that you have all the fuel and resources you need to keep making ducks for us.
Well, we're on the doorstep of breeding season 2025. It's hard to feel that way when it's 20 some below outside, but when it warms up here, it warms up fast. That's growing up in Wisconsin, the temperature fluctuations, I don't remember them being as dramatic, because we had, big forests, and so the trees and the shade kind of stabilized temperatures. But here, man, you can get 70 during the day and 0 at night, and there's just nothing to hold, that there's not a thermal blanket holding, the sun's warm energy, overnight. And I think last night it was a clear night, and so it got cold pretty fast.
I think the spring around here is, obviously I love watching the fall migration, but I think the spring migration might even take the cake on that. Even though you can't hunt ducks, it's after a long cold winter, it's and when you have that fast warm up, and all of a sudden you just get droves and droves and droves of ducks coming back to the prairies. It's a sign of life again, and so it's really cool to see.
Yeah, that always has been something. Even as a young boy, I've always lived where there's snow and ice, right? And you go to a wetland ecosystem, and in the spring and the summer and the fall, it is alive. It can be deafening. There's wildlife everywhere and activity everywhere. And you go to that same wetland in the winter, and there's nothing. Like, maybe you'll have a pheasant in the cattails, maybe there'll be a rabbit, few, local bird species, but nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. And it's going to come alive here, in probably about 60 days. Can't wait. So, well, hey, everybody, appreciate your time. Great job with the program. Great job on the podcast. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts and ideas and energy with the listener.
Thanks for having us
Thanks
on,
for having
Joel.
us.
Beautiful. Kyle, we'll see you later.
All right, thanks, gentlemen.
You bet.
See you, Kyle.